3 scary true stories you won't believe. Number 1. In the middle of the woods.
Growing up, I lived in the middle of the woods. There were no neighbors for about a mile on each side, and we owned 60 acres of forest and then a swamp after that. So basically, I lived in the middle of absolute nowhere. One summer, when I was about 15, I was out in the middle of the woods playing with my dog when I kept feeling something hit my elbow. I'd go to throw Fred's ball, and the bump would make me throw it almost straight up. Assuming it was just me bumping it on branches or something, I ignored it. After the 4th or 5th time of it happening, I thought, well, this sucks. I'll just go home. Walking back, I felt uneasy. But I knew I was just freaking myself out because we were out in the woods alone. About an hour later, Fred and I are at home on the couch when the garage door opens and he starts barking and barking and barking. I hop up to go let in my mom or dad, even though they were home really early. I peered through the peephole and saw the door was still shut and no one was in the garage. Quieting Fred down, I opened the door slowly and called out for my dad. Nothing. No response at all. So I go out to check the door and it's still locked. Okay, sure. Weird, but oh well. Fred heard it too, so at least I know I'm not crazy. About 20 minutes later, I heard the door open again, and this time, Fred starts growling like crazy. I quiet him down again and just assume it's the wind or something making noise, even though by this point, my heart is racing. I hear footsteps come up the stairs and think, oh geez, Dad really is home this time, and hop up and run to the door. It starts to jiggle, so I run faster to let him in. I peep through the hole, and even though my hand is loosely around the jiggling handle, there's no one on the other side of the door. Terrified, I go hide on the couch with all the lights on. Fred is still growling. About an hour after that, I start to feel a little better, even though I'm still terrified. Then I hear the door handle jingle again. This time it was Fred jingling it. He needed to go outside, and the only way outside is through the garage. Fantastic. I literally sprint with him to the kennel, and as I'm standing in there, I decide to ask this thing questions to make myself feel better, because I knew it wouldn't answer me. Thinking about what to ask it, my eyes are drawn to the huge, heavy oak door on the kennel. It was always open because it was too heavy for me to move easily. I said, okay, ghost, if you're real, you'll shut this heavy door. Nothing. A minute goes by. Nothing. Fred is still sniffing around. I turn around to yell at him to hurry up, and then from behind me I hear click. I whip around and saw the giant door had swung shut and latched. Okay, clearly it was just the wind. It wasn't really windy, but it was the wind, for sure, had to be. I said, okay, ghost, that was the wind. If you're really real, you open this massive door back up. Nothing. I relax a bit and then squat down with my head in on my knees, reminiscing about how lame I just was being scared when I heard click-clack. The door was wide open. Fred was done, so we booked it back into the house and locked every door in the house. For the next 5 hours, I would hear the footsteps on the stairs and the door handle jingling every few minutes, until finally around 10 p.m., my dad walks in and yells at me for wasting electricity. I never told him or my mom about it until about 3 months later, when my dad came in front hunting after dark. He looked shaken, and I asked him what was wrong. He said he aimed at 2 beers but missed both completely because it felt as if something was hitting his elbow and making him shoot way above the deer. That's when I told him everything.
Number 2. The house on Plum Street.
When I was 12, my family and I fell on hard times. We got kicked out of our house and ended up in emergency housing. Basically, we We went to a charity who found us a house that we were able to rent for $300 a month, but only for 3 months. That summer, my mom and stepdad separated temporarily, and my 3 younger siblings would go to my stepdad's for a week or so, then came back to my mom and me. This house was creepy, really creepy. It started off with just that feeling, like something isn't quite right, that you might not be the only person in the room. During the day, that's all it was, the feeling that something was different. Your instincts pricking at you. I tried to ignore it, but as soon as dusk arrived, things would start happening. More than once, I could hear this static-filled music playing, but I couldn't find the source. It just filled the hallways. I heard whispering and went to my 2 sisters' room. In the open closet, a pair of eyes looked at me and disappeared. My brother spent 1 night in the house and didn't come back. In my room, I could never win. On the wall, there was a mirror. When I flipped it over to face the window, I watched tall shadow figures pace in front of it. In my mother's room, the same shadow figures paced in circles around her room. One night, she and I sat up for 2 hours in her bed watching these shadows. She was strongly religious and didn't know what to make of it. During the time we lived there was a lunar eclipse. I had never seen one before and was very excited for it. When I went out to look, every time, this terror took over me and I couldn't stay outside. I couldn't explain it. When the moon was fully cloaked, I went outside, looked up, but my head suddenly snapped down and to my left. I could see 3 tall shadows walking in between the tall pine trees in the yard. Panicked, I ran back inside and into my room, flinging myself under the covers with my eyes shut tightly, but listened to the pacing outside my bedroom window. This went on for the entire 3 months. We moved out at the end of the summer into a new house, and my mom and stepdad got back together, and I was with my younger siblings again. We all agreed that the house on Plum Street was messed up, and I still get chills when we drive by it, just to see who lives there.
Number 3. His lovers or his victims.
This was super creepy. At least I always thought it was. I was working in a big grocery warehouse. Hundreds of people worked there. It was night shift. Sitting in a break room at lunch with a couple of other guys trying to find something to talk about to stay awake. I started talking about the best jobs I'd ever had. After a minute or so, this older guy who never ever said more than 1 word or 2 at a time starts telling us about this nursing home he used to work at. He was in his 60s and he'd already been at this current job for 20 plus years at the time. So his story took place when he was a young man, I guessed. He was an attendant for this nursing home and he told us he used to have relationships with many of the female residents. These were elderly ladies and handicapped people as well. He told us he'd usually get it on with at least one of them every night, and they were all very grateful for his attention. He felt he was in heaven at the time. According to him, some of the ladies he was involved with were in their 80s, and all of them were very lonely. He said his favorite was a younger woman who had some nerve disorder. He said that although she couldn't talk, he could tell she loved his attentions by the way she'd squirm and wiggle. He told us he'd eventually been let go from this dream job, but not for what reason. When break was over and he left the break room, me and the other guys sat there for a moment and I asked him if he'd ever heard that story before. He said, "Hell no. I've never even heard him talk that long about anything before." The guy in question was such a quiet guy, and I switched back to the day shift. Not long after that, so I never talked about it with him again. But it really stuck in my mind in a creepy way. I think he believed what he said. But were these women his lovers or his victims?